The game is called surviving. And all I could think was we shouldn't be surviving, we should all be striving and thriving. But when there are policies set in place to benefit greed, injustice and segregation, I guess it's our job to bring about education to the nation. Because it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, Latino or Asian. We should all have the same opportunity in this great nation.
What we've been talking about today is about a journey, and it doesn't matter where you start, and it doesn't matter if you get it right or get it wrong, as long as you take the first step on that journey.
The systems and structures that a lot of organisations, including ours, have in place enable young people to learn what the challenges, the structures and the systems are beyond us and in the wider world. And so those challenges and those obstacles, if we as organisations can't get youth voice through that, then what hope have we got to affect change?
The young people that we have involved say is that they feel like we're constantly getting their views, but they're not actually getting anything out of it.
No.
So it's about us ticking boxes, and I think that's really, really so important in any participation. Are we just getting them involved so that we can tick lots of boxes and get lots of data? What are they actually getting out of it?
Who have established their structures and processes are reluctant to collaborate, to share their own ideas. So whilst the third sector isn't collaborating, and you've got one organisation that's doing loads to support youth voice and one organisation that's really struggling, as long as we're not collaborating, then that is ultimately suppressing youth voice.
The point is you listen and you have it permeating your organisation, but there may be some kinds of meetings and discussions you just have to have in certain ways, and as long as you're honest that these are the ones we're having, you have the option to attend, you're treating people with a bit more respect perhaps.
Being made to think about arguments that I don't believe in, and I think all of us should have to do that sometimes, just in order to work out what we do really believe. So it's been really thought-provoking. It's also been really inspiring, particularly to hear Darren this morning with his poetry and his commitment to changing the system. So it's been a great morning, so I'm looking forward to what we'll do with the afternoon.
How can we make sure that young people don't give up their power? One of the most depressing things that I've heard from some of our partners, some of you, about young people is where the system feels so overwhelming, they don't know where to get support from. They actually say it's easier just to be homeless. So they're giving up their power to affect change on society, and I find that profoundly depressing. So we've got to really keep a hold of the core kind of questions, and somehow it's a balance of that empowerment of voice along with that kind of rigorous analysis of, you know, where we can actually affect change on some of these thematic issues. That seems the best chance we have of making a difference in the long term.
There is an appetite at the moment with funders to be more relationship, and I think that's where you've got power now, because some of the things we were talking about was about having conversations with funders, not seeing them as something that you write to and come back, but actually some of the strategies that came up which were really interesting was being proactive, and rather than if you've got a number of funders to service, rather than having them each visit and taking your time, because we know sort of 30% of your time is servicing funders, someone was talking about actually being proactive and saying, okay, you're my 4 key funders, come together in the room, let me show you all together and let's talk about this because it's a partnership.
You know, do subcommittees or beneficiary committees, do those sort of count? And I think we went back to the conversation Amanda had was about the no test. Do they still have the ability to say no? It doesn't necessarily have to be a trustee, but do they have the ability to say no?
Personally, I've just got 3 tests that I always try and apply, which is just from my experience of being a trustee and being chair of a charity. And the first one is the no test. So is there genuinely opportunity within your decision-making process and your strategy process for young people to say no? No, that doesn't represent me. No, that doesn't reflect what I think our charity should be doing. The second one is the dollar test. So if accountability is always about power, then there has to be a conversation about finances and money, and how are young people supported to understand charity finances and the legalities behind that, and how are they really truly feeding into that without kind of tokenistically sitting there on the board, not really understanding what's going on. And then the third one is the challenge test. So that's what forums and spaces does your organisation give young people to genuinely speak truth to power? So if they're not a trustee, how does a young person who's a member of your organisation tell the board that actually they disagree with the direction of the charity or the way the finances are being taken forward? And that's just from my experience. I feel like if an organisation is able to apply those 3 tests and young people can actually do those things, then your structures are probably quite open to young people genuinely holding you accountable.
We looked at, first of all, does it have to be perfect and beyond reproach to avoid any allegations of tokenism before you put it in place? Or do you go with it and see what evolves?
We dive straight into who is working in our organisation and then who was on the board. But it started with who is working. Rather than saying how do we make our language more inclusive and all those things, it sort of started with let's get the right people working in the organisation, and then those things will happen.
What's the kind of particular value of young people leading policy change? It is their ability to speak directly to what matters to them, which obviously someone who's not a young person can only do it one step removed. And there was a line that Darren used about it's just obvious that we care, and I guess there's a way that a young person's going to be talking about a policy issue in the way it relates to them and to what they know that maybe can't be recreated.
Is to develop talent, diverse talent within an organisation. Where in a big corporate company there'll be talent development programmes and mentoring, but in a small organisation there isn't necessarily the infrastructure to do that. So thinking about where else we can get that from, and not feeling like we've got to just sit there and try and do it on our own, but how we can connect to others to do that.
When you're doing recruitment for a trustee, you really want to know what are you going to bring the organisation, like what do you have to bring to us or to the cause, and is being a young person just good enough for that to be, and I think the answer that we got was yes, because they bring new perspectives, and that in order to do that you need to change the perspective of existing board members and the organisation about the importance and the role that young people can bring.
Using young people to influence policy. So many organisations might employ people to lead their policy work, and what does it mean when we kind of replace that function or supplement it with the input of young people? And is that something that should be a paid role, and how do you resource that, and how do you build that into the organisational structure?
It was really interesting coming to a place like Winchester and hearing them speak about like diversity, because in Birmingham, Coventry, I think West Midlands in general, we don't really question it too much just because that's how the cities are built. Like we're used to being very diverse and seeing each other, but like the fact that they have to question how do we get more people involved, it's crazy to me, because it's like, is that just not naturally how it is? So it's nice to really put in the input and actually simplify how easy it is when you stop overcomplicating things and you break it down to what people need instead of what companies need.
What makes young people anxious, slightly different for young women and young men. Brexit, interestingly, comes up really high. Now, we haven't been able to dig into that, but based on some sort of focus groups and anecdotes and conversations I've had with some young people, it's sort of the uncertainty, and is this going to make my life worse? It's already pretty grim, I'm already struggling. Does that mean? Because if you look, the young women say the current financial situation, they're almost not different in a funny sort of way, but they are really engaged and worried that what's going to happen politically is going to mean that their own situations deteriorate even further.
Youth Voice is actually at the heart of what everyone is trying to achieve. People's systems and structures and stuff are quite different, but really Youth Voice is central to everything that everyone's doing, and even though people's organisations might be different in what they're trying to achieve, what they really care about is the future and opportunities of young people. So, yeah.